All right. Thank you all for joining us for this session entitled Graphic Novels Innovate, a conversation with the creatives behind Play Like a Girl. I'm really happy that everybody can be with us today as part of the 4th annual 1455 Summer Festival hosted by 1455 Literary Arts. I'm Jessie Luce. I'm a 1455 board member, a writer, an essayist, poet, all these things. But I'm just really stoked today to welcome David and Misty Wilson, who are collaborators on the new graphic novel, Play Like a Girl. Misty Wilson is a writer and educator out of Ohio with a background in reading intervention and special education. Her experience as a 7th grade football player is the primary inspiration for Play Like a Girl. David Wilson is an instructor for Kent State University's Visual Communication and Design program with a background in illustration and film. His work has been published in places like The Atlantic, Boom, Comics, Forbes Magazine, and the Boston Globe. He has a forthcoming graphic novel from HarperCollins. All right, welcome David and Misty.
Hello.
Hey, all right. So I'm really excited to have you all here, mainly because I'm familiar with David's work from last summer. We did it for 1455 then, but then I also have a kid now, and this is the kind of work that I was always missing as a girl myself. I was super into soccer, and that was at that time unusual, which is not at all now. But this is such a cool topic, and to have a nonfiction middle grade comic for people, comic graphic novel, is just super cool. So for you all, my first question for you in this little bit of an interview is, I know that this is available for pre-order now. I want to emphasize that. So if anybody's interested, they got to go out and get it. Pre-order is fantastic for writers and illustrators. But Misty, I just really want to hear from you. Tell me about your experience in football and where the inspiration came for this autobiographical work.
Okay. So my experience in football, I played in 7th grade, like you said, and it was the only year I played, mostly because if you read the book, you'll see like at first I struggled and then actually ended up being pretty good at it, but I was in middle school, had a very poor mentality that I don't recommend any kids have. But I was good, and I was always afraid of not being the best at something. So like I was huge in actually I like hit a growth spurt, and in 4th grade I was like bigger than everybody, and by 7th grade I was kind of the same size as boys, and so when I decided to play, it wasn't a big deal because we were all kind of the same size. By the end though, boys were kind of growing. By the end of 7th grade, boys were growing, and it was one of those things where I was like, are they going to be better than me next year then because they're bigger? And so like, don't do that. Kids, girls especially, like be confident, because I always regretted never playing again because it was awesome. But my inspiration behind writing the book was actually when I became a teacher after many years of college and other degrees. I was in my 3rd year teaching. I taught 4th grade, and I was introduced to Raina Telgemeier's graphic novels. Some popular ones are Smile and Sisters, Ghosts. And it was my first time ever seeing a middle grade graphic novel. Though David's always been big into reading comics, and he introduced me to more indie comics like, Walking Dead and Saga. And so I had experienced reading comics, but never graphic novels. And so that was my first experience, like understanding that they even existed. And then the following year, I was teaching 3rd grade at a school where the kids were just obsessed with these graphic novels. Like that's all they read, which was incredible. So I finally picked up a few and actually was like reading through them. And, I had the idea like, wow, like Raina's graphic novel is all about this real life experience of falling and getting her teeth knocked out. And so many kids could relate to like her experience with braces. And I started thinking about me playing football and trying to fit in middle school. And I was like, that's such a universal experience. So it was all like kind of in the back of my mind. And then I had like this one student who she used to stay in for recess quite often. And she would be like, I don't feel like I like fit in with anybody out there. Like the girls don't want me to hang out with them because I don't want to do the same things as them, but the boys don't want to hang out with me because I'm a girl, which I actually didn't think you saw as much anymore, like from when I was in school, but like this girl was experiencing it. So eventually I went to David and I was like, hey, I've got this idea. I've been reading these graphic novels and I feel like I might have a story to tell that kids could relate to that might actually be helpful for some people to like see themselves in. And he was immediately like, yeah, let's try it. So that's kind of how it all started.
That's awesome. What position did you play?
I played offensive right tackle primarily, but I always wanted to play defense because I loved tackling people. And eventually the coach did let me play some defense. Even then I still played right tackle, right defensive tackle. And then I got to try out halfback, which nice. I only tried it like a time or two. And I was really bummed because I was fast, I knew what I was doing, and yet I had poor experiences doing it. Like I didn't do well when I was doing it, but
Yeah, well, that's part of middle school, like that. Right. Yeah, that's awesome. Okay, so that makes perfect sense, and I so get that as like seeing that in education and seeing like how different genres can connect with people, especially the visual format, in such a cool way. As little kids, it makes so much sense. And I'm always like really sad. I said this already, but I'm really sad for myself that I didn't have that graphic novel stuff available to me when I was a kid. So that's so cool that that's moving in that direction. Okay, so moving forward with this, it's you all are married, which is so awesome. And I don't think I could do this with my husband. So I'm very proud of you both because I think I would make it through. But
let's see.
There's still time. Still time.
Well, it's tricky. It's so That's funny. Yeah, it's so interesting because I'm more on the writing side of things. And I've only come across writers who work together, and it's often like interesting relationships. There's always like the people who are ghostwriting, but I'm talking more like the people as a mother-daughter writers who write novels together and stuff. And that I can't process like how a brain would do that other than dividing up chapters, but then whether or not that really feels like a whole novel is a question. But for you, it's interesting because you have very different roles, and those roles have to kind of mold together, which is it's nice. It's in some ways you get to be independent while working together. But it's interesting, and that's why I wanted to hear from you because I'm fascinated by this. So, David, for you, when you were doing this and you were illustrating Misty's stuff, and it felt like more like a conversation. Explain your process for translating Misty's written story. How did you take her plot and apply it?
I think one thing I going into was when we were pitching the book, we were kind of writing it together. And then when we started actually like making the book, we actually had to define roles. I don't know why, but for some reason I thought like, since, we're in the same house or whatever, and we're talking this through, I always wanted to like help with the writing. And it just got to a point where it's like, I can't write. Like, this is your journey to write and your thing to write. And I'm trying to like, I wasn't trying to like butt in, but I'm drawing it. So I'm trying to like be a part of the writing process just to kind of be there. And it was definitely this like point where like, we both can't write the story. Like it has to have one voice and it has to be your voice. And then it became probably not the most efficient process. I know not the most efficient process, but it turned out really well where we didn't do a script. She would just kind of write like, this is what happens in this part. And I would draw it how I saw it. And then she would edit it. I would redraw it. She would put the dialogue in and I would redraw it. And it's very, very organic. And I would never do it with somebody who I couldn't just walk over to sitting in the chair next to me and like, check this. Okay, cool. I'll go back. But for us, I think it was really nice. I think the book's better because of it.
Huh. That's
But
fascinating.
It's really messy and organic and kind of wrong.
I mean, it's whatever gets it done, right? I mean, you know, that's so interesting to me. I mean, and in some ways that makes more sense because I can't imagine applying, because I feel like you would shift it. You would want it to stay organic. So I find it difficult to imagine long distance creative works like this. And I haven't done it, and that's part of the reason why. But that's really interesting. I mean, so for you, Misty, I mean, when you had somebody laying it out, were you ever like pausing in terms of how things were being drawn out and like kind of questioning how they should appear on the page, and especially like character design? Were you ever like, hey, this kid has to look this way?
Actually, so for this memoir, I made it a point to, besides my stepdad, we changed everyone's name because I don't have relationships with those people from middle school. And I felt really weird, like, you know, putting anyone into this book and naming names without like getting permission or anything.
Sure. Yeah.
And then we decided to go ahead and do the same thing with what they looked like. So what we did for character design was David was like, I need to know what these people look like, so find me some reference pictures. And I just like got online and got like cute celebrities that I was like, oh, this is a cute middle schooler. And then he just, from those photos, like did his own thing. So they look nothing like those people, but it was like something for him to like draw from.
They don't look like the celebrities either.
No, like I will give you one example because it's just, I think, funny for people to know. And you might not even know who he is, but maybe somebody watching this will. Cameron Boyce, he was in Descendants 3. He actually died, but he's like super freckly. He's adorable. He's so cute. But he was like the person I sent a picture to for my crush in the book. And I was like, okay, draw him. So if you ever look up Cameron Boyce and then you like look at the graphic novel and you're looking at the crush, you're gonna be like, that is not the same person, because he just took those photos and like did his own thing with them. And like, it was totally fine by me. Like, he's the artist, I'm not. Like,
and that's awesome.
It looks too much like Cameron Boyce. Everyone goes, hey, that's Cameron Boyce.
Right. Right. Misty was not dating Cameron Boyce when she was in 7th grade.
Well, let's see. I want to make sure everybody sees this thing before we go. So I'm going to share a screen here so we can make sure we can check this thing out to get an idea for this. Because it's
yeah, that's
lovely.
him.
There we go. Yeah, there's Cameron Boyce. That's funny. Yeah, I find this one so awesome because of the character design, because it's pretty simple, right? Like it's the nice simple style for middle grade. It's really approachable. But like I was really like, hey, I can see like the separation between the characters really well, which isn't necessarily the case when a graphic novel is so simple all the time, right? Because it's stylistically. And so like when we've got this simple line structure for faces, like this is looking like awesome in that separation. So you've cracked the code. There you go.
Just try to, it's like, how do I make it as fun for kids to read?
Right.
That was like my ultimate goal, was like, no matter what we're talking about, like, how do I make it fun and how do I keep their attention and make them connect?
And that makes
so hopefully I did that, but that was like my running goal.
Yeah. Well, and I love so much about this because it does have that like approachable quality, so that we can connect with just the facial emotions in a way that is still taking us forward. Like there's still, for example, let's see, where is this one? I really liked this one because this reminds me of 7th grade, because this is just like very classic for me, and staying over at somebody's house and that kind of thing. But what I loved about this is like the quiet effect of it is really nice, because we're inside her head, right? We've got our boxes over here showing the thoughts, but then it's also like the scene itself has this really subtle quiet effect. So like, you're immersed, and that's really important. And like in her head, just by looking at the effect of the scene. And so good job, David.
Thank you.
Good job. There we go.
There's one of my like favorite pages, I think, because maybe some people have never felt this, but I feel like everyone's always been in a room where you feel like you're by yourself.
Right. Yeah, that's a nice way to do it. Well, even like the light has that effect, because I mean, we all know what that television in a dark room feels like. And so that's a nice way to view it. Anyway, okay, so I want to make sure everybody saw it, so that we get a feel for the style, because it's nice. It's a nice, I would be so excited to have this in a classroom for kids. Okay, so moving off of that, since we've got, you know, that sense of character and how that's building, did you ever feel like at some point you needed, I mean, you kind of talk about back and forth and how you're keeping this really organic. Did you ever just really need help from each other though? Did you ever pause and like yell to the other side of the room? Yeah.
Yeah. Pretty much the entire book was yelling to the other side of the room. I mean, honestly, like he said, like we kind of, what I did was like, I took notes on everything that happened in 7th grade that I could possibly remember, all those important things that could like be built into a story. And then we kind of like wrote it together based on, you know, my life. And we're like trying to put it into a story with a beginning, a middle, and an end. And, you know, in real life that it doesn't always work out that way, but I was very fortunate that in 7th grade, like I kind of did have like my own, you know, arc. But then when we got an editor, it was just ripped to shreds. And all the work we did, and they were brilliant notes, but it was like me sobbing in the kitchen. And I'm like, why did she even buy the book? Like it was rough. So like there was a turning to him for emotional support, but then also like, okay, how do I fix this? So, you know, it was bouncing ideas off of each other.
Lots of pizza.
Lots of pizza nights, lots of like paper taped to the wall and like scene cards and laying across the floor. It was a lot. Me constantly, you know, running ideas by him or asking for his input on this and that. And then I think in terms of art, you know, he asked for my approval a lot. I feel like just to make sure, like, you know, it's my memoir. So like, just to make sure I was good with it. For the most part, like I felt like it was what you want to add.
Well, I feel like, I won't speak for all artists, but there's like I think we can tend to overdraw, and it's, you know, you get stuck in these pages, and it was nice. It's frustrating too, because like you either have to like get rid of things you like or redraw things you like, but at the same time handing it to her and, you know, Misty being like, I didn't get that. I didn't see from this panel to this panel how that works, or like we're missing something here, or like we don't need this. And it's frustrating. So you're like, oh, I gotta go back to the drawing board. But when you're drawing and you're in there, it's hard to see those things. So it's always like she is like the checkpoint before the editor. You know, it's like, does this work for you? Like, can you read it as a pedestrian in a way? As a non-artist, does it make sense? And if it doesn't, then I need to tackle that before we send it off to the editor.
I feel like this book was very, very, very collaborative in that I feel like we were both each other's editors in many ways, before we would ever send it off. I mean, for art and the writing, just constantly.
And then we just realized that we weren't very good editors anyway.
Well, once our editor got back to us, he'd be like, oh, well then, all right.
Very, very humbling experience.
Yeah.
Were you happy with the end structure of it? I think that's the trick when you have the editor. Yeah,
well, because when we started this whole process, to be honest, I don't even know how we got where we got. Like, we knew nothing. We had a great experience to write a story about, but we knew nothing about telling stories. So we've done a lot of like creative projects together in the past, writing things like movies and stuff, but they were never like important, you know, it wasn't career building or anything, you know, like it wasn't something we had to like study things for. And so like we didn't know anything. That's really what it came down to. So after I got my first edit letter back and we did our first round of revisions, I sent it off and I just started studying because I had, you know, a while before hearing back. And it was just buying a bunch of craft books and then buying a bunch of novels and a bunch of graphic novels. I read so much in such a short amount of time just to study craft. And by the time I got my next round back, I was like, okay, I can like point out a lot of things that like I'm doing wrong, and a lot of things that I learned. And by like the 10th round of revisions, finally I like sent it off to my editor, and she would finally came back and was like, okay, this is like good. Like, it only took 10 rounds. But like I spent a year studying. So like there were just some big changes that she helped with, obviously, of course. But then also like it was me learning on my own too. And so I don't remember how this conversation started. What was the question?
Well, it sounds like you could build a craft graphic novel by the time you're done with this, because it's like, I think it's something so fascinating to me, because there's actually not that much stuff on that in terms of the collaboration, right? There's always the writing part and then the illustrating part, and it rarely is the merging of the two like approach. And to me, that's really fascinating. And I teach creative writing, and I have a lot of students who wish that they could merge those two things, and there really isn't like a clear way for them to go about it. And I think that that's a really fascinating concept to think about. But anyway,
I get asked a lot. I'll get like, people will send me messages all the time, like about working with an artist, and every time I have to be like, my experience, I think, was too unique, like right. Working with my husband, to be able to like use it as a reference for you. Like it's just not something that I am particularly helpful with, or it's just like other people have a whole script written out with art notes, what should be in each panel. And me, I'm like, can you just do what you want? Like,
they're at the mall.
Yeah, that's exactly it. They're at the mall.
Here's some dialogue. It's like, okay.
Exactly. That's exactly how it went. So like, if you want help from me, I'm sorry.
Well, how about you all have kids, and how did that change this process for you? I mean, middle grade is going to be closer to your heart than it is for me, just because of that age, you know, and being aware of their reading and where they're headed mentally and all that stuff. So did this affect you in terms of how you approached it, having kids? Did you kind of separate yourself from it anyway, because you were in this process, and it didn't matter as much because you just had to get it done and get it through? What do you think?
Well, so our kids are currently 4 and 6.
Okay. So a little young.
So when we were working on it, like obviously it was like 2 years ago, they were a little young. However, like obviously being in the classroom, like seeing what those kids are going through definitely made me approach things, I don't want to say differently, because it was like my experience was what it was, but it also did help me see that like a lot of my experiences were universal. Like so many kids go through wanting to fit in, and so many kids go through friendship breakups and toxic friendships. And so it was like things that maybe I wouldn't have stressed as much in the book. I definitely did stress more, because I do see it happening, and I want kids to know like they're not alone in those experiences. Right. But as for like our kids at home.
Yeah, I was just mad that they weren't more proud of us.
I know, right? But we also, like, we got our book deal in March of 2020, April of 2020. So like the pandemic had just hit. We had no childcare. And so, I mean, our kids at home were more like,
they probably suffered.
Honestly, yeah. No, we just, it was hard. I mean, it was hard to be the best parents we could be while also trying to, I mean, even that school year I was finishing up online teaching, and then he was doing grad school online. So I feel like if anything, our kids weren't so much like an inspiration as far as like the content of our book, but they definitely motivated us to get done so that we no longer had to be doing it. Like, it was just a lot.
Hey, that's an inspiration too. There are many projects out there that have not been finished because there was no child to manage.
Yeah.
Can only hear daddy.
Yeah.
Let me finish this page.
Yeah.
No, that makes
You're
perfect
inspiring
sense.
me to work so much faster.
Yeah, it's funny. I was thinking that your kids were older, but that makes perfect sense. And it makes perfect sense that, you know, it's interesting to me how much art is going to be influenced in the next 4 to 6 years of what was produced during that time too, right? Like I think for many publications, you know, you don't even know that they are parents, that it's just completely hidden from the perception of it, but man, it's going to influence it. So, I mean, that's, you know, that's just one more thing as an effect. It's wild. So
it's like
anyway,
we're doing an interview at nighttime right now because all our kids had to be in bed. That's how it was working through this whole book. Like, let's just get through the day, and then we're going to work from 8 p.m. till 2 a.m. every day.
Yeah. I had a novel put on hold during the pandemic, and so I started the next one just because that's what you do. And in that process, it is amazing when you realize what you can do at night. Like when you know, and then it's also amazing to realize what you can't do. Like when you're like done. Yeah.
Or you think you're doing, and you haven't been doing anything for the last 2 hours.
Yes. Or when you look at it the next morning and you're like, what is this?
You gotta delete all 1,000 of those words.
Well, so that is a complex process, but I mean, now that it's done, it's coming out soon. Like, what are you hoping is like the thing that comes out of this for readers? Like, what is the thing that you want them to walk away with?
You mean like the message I want them to walk away with?
Yeah, like what is it that, I mean, it's a nonfiction story. So you had to cut stuff, which I think people don't realize when they're applying nonfiction stuff, right? So you had to design it, even though it's supposed to be the truth, which is what, you know, the biggest question when I was in grad school as a creative writer is, you know, what is nonfiction? Because it's certainly not truth, right? So you had to remove and you still had to mold it, right? So in your process of doing that, what was it that you hoped came out the other side?
I think no matter what got cut or added, it was ultimately about following your passion and staying true to yourself. Like, it is a story about perseverance and grit and, you know, girls doing hard things, or really anybody doing hard things. But I think it's more so for me about the middle school experience of being yourself, no matter how hard things are. And I think it's a pretty common experience for kids to, I mean, everyone wants to fit in. It's just a matter of who do you want to fit in with. And I want kids like look at the people they're trying to fit in with, and it's like, are those people your people? Like, whether they're popular or not doesn't matter. It's, do they accept you for who you are and allow you to be who you want to be, even if that's not cool. Like, the idea of not fitting in and instead standing out, and like that being a cool thing, you know. Right. For me, that's like the biggest thing I wanted to be taken away.
And that makes perfect sense. That makes perfect sense for every 7th grader. Like that's where it's at. Okay, so I am super excited to see this thing taking off. You have an awesome blurb from Dr. Jen Welter, the first female NFL coach. Super cool.
Very cool.
Yes, congratulations on that one. That's awesome.
Thanks.
And then you've been noticed as a Junior Library Guild Gold selection, right? Which is super exciting. And I'm really excited to see, you know, I know that this just opened up for galleys for people to check out. And I know that's really important. And I really want to see where people can go with this, because I think that there's a lot of avenues for teachers, for libraries, a lot of interesting locations for this to go that I think is well deserved. So are you thinking about continuing in the graphic novel genre? Are you thinking about continuing to work with middle grade? Or are you both thinking about different things? Or where are you all thinking?
So our book deal was actually for 2 graphic novels. So we are currently working, well, we're trying our process a little bit differently this time. We'll see how it goes. I am actually writing a script right now. But when I say script, it still says they go to the mall. It's just that I'm writing out dialogue and narration ahead of time. Don't get too excited. So yeah, I'm working on our second graphic novel. It is middle grade, and we actually both are doing our own thing as well. So my agent has a contemporary YA novel, not a graphic novel, that I've been working on with him for a good year at this point. And so I'm waiting to hear back from him about that. And
yeah, I'm working on a YA graphic novel as well. And then, as far as like staying in middle grade and like working together, I think, as long as everyone will have us, I think that's part of the plan. Because I think we like the process. We like the age group. It's fun. It's fun for us to kind of tap into that. But then we also kind of want to work on more serious things. And that's where we kind of branch off into our own, I guess, separate identities of young adult books.
Yeah, he's over here like writing this dark YA stuff, and I'm over here like sad romance stuff, and then all of a sudden, like together, we're like fun middle grade.
I mean, it kind of makes perfect sense, actually. Like if you think about it, these things mold together. So
you don't want it all in one. I'll tell you that much.
How is that switch from moving from middle grade to YA? How is that switch like mentally? Is it an easy jump for you, or do you have to be like, okay, now I'm turning it a little older? What do you think?
So I actually primarily read YA and adult. Right. I read middle grade mostly to study craft, but like my heart lies in romance. So I read that mostly. So for me, it comes very naturally, whereas middle grade's a little bit harder. But the switching on and off is actually kind of easy for me because it is so different. I think I'd struggle more if it was like, if similar, even similar themes, like it's a different voice, different story. I mean, it's just so different. It's just easy to like, in the morning, I'll work on my middle grade, and before bed, I'll work on my YA. It's like, it's not a problem. I don't know about you.
I think I had a hard time.
Yeah.
I had a hard time figuring out YA because, before Play Like a Girl, I only did adult stuff, like adult indie comics and kind of like, whatever. But switching to YA, it was kind of like this, what do I have to say about being a teen? Like, how do I fit into this space? But then when I think about being a teen, these lessons that we talk about in books, they're all kind of universal. It's just, how do you pitch it? And then, it's cheesy, but like, what do you want to say to the person you were at 17? Especially having hindsight of almost being 40 now, like I can tell you what matters and what doesn't. Right. And how do I put that into a book? And once I figured that out, it became a little bit easier, not making a book, but figuring out what I wanted to talk about.
That makes sense. What about from an illustration standpoint? Do you feel like your style gets to be different, more loose or tighter, or what do you think?
I think it's tighter, especially with Play. It was so fun and energetic. Not that the YA stuff isn't energetic, but it's, like Misty said, it's darker, the tone's different. So the illustration has to represent that. So it's a lot more detailed. The lines are a little grittier and kind of messier, right? In like an artistic way. Process-wise, it's probably the same though. It's mostly aesthetic.
All right. Well, I am super excited for you all because it's a nice sense of like a door opening, and it sounds like it's multiple doors opening, which is super cool because it is the independent stuff, but then the stuff working together and moving in different directions. And that's always good, right? Movement forward is always good for any creative. So that's super cool. Well,
fingers crossed.
Yeah. About it. Well, it's interesting because I've had I've talked to a lot of writers during the pandemic, and it's really interesting to see, you know, my last summer festival, I talked to a lot of people who were having their debut come out, and it was a lot of frustration over how this is going to be marketed during this time and that kind of thing. But it always was like, well, at least I have the work though. Like, at least I have this out, and then we go to the next thing. And that is, I think, for me, it's always like the lifeline of like a true like survivor through it, is like I go to the next thing, and when one thing struggles, you keep going, you know. And we assume that writers who are doing amazing work have this great opus and then they're done, and then they, you know, spend 10 years and they think about the next one, and it's not true at all. Like, it's just you keep moving.
Pure struggle. Pure terrible struggle.
That's how it works. Anyway, I'm so glad to talk to you all this evening. Thank you so much. I wanted to make sure that everybody knows, again, that this middle grade is called Play Like a Girl, and I really want everyone to buy it for their kid who needs that feeling of being okay with themselves and going out into the world of sports, or just the world in general, and being okay with themselves. So for our 1455 viewers, thank you so much for stopping in for Graphic Novels Innovate, a conversation with the creatives behind Play Like a Girl. We're really excited to see where this graphic novel goes, and we hope we can catch up with Misty and David later. For those watching, please be sure to check out 1455literaryarts.org to, 1455litarts.org to learn more about the organization. Free programming like this offered throughout the year. So we don't just do the festival, we do lots of stuff. But in general, thank you, David and Misty. This has been awesome.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thanks. It was a blast.
Yeah, good luck with your stuff. All right.